On Tuesday, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear a big case important to Colorado and our country, Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado Civil Rights Commission. This case centers around a gay couple from Colorado and the Lakewood baker who refused to make them a wedding cake. Mark Stewart talked to the Denver Post Washington Bureau reporter who will be covering the case this week.
Joining us from Washington is Denver Post reporter Mark Matthews. Mark, welcome. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about this case. It obviously touches on many of the big issues of our time, but really at the end of the day, this is a case about the First Amendment.
Well, there's a lot of things. What the case boils down to is Jack Phillips and his attorneys are arguing that this is a case of expression, that he shouldn't be allowed, he should be forced to express something that he doesn't believe with. On the other side, the couple is arguing that they are being discriminated against for who they are. And, for the court here, they have to decide whose liberties are being infringed on here.
And among the decision makers, Neil Gorsuch, newly installed justice from Colorado, who has a track record. Some of his past rulings have shown that he really does side with individuals and religious liberties. What can we read into with his placement on the court and this case?
Well, I think that here you're going to see Justice Gorsuch fill the role of Justice Scalia here. You're not going to see much deviation from that. Prior to coming to the Supreme Court, Justice Gorsuch, while he was on the 10th Circuit, ruled in a number of different cases dealing with questions of religion. One of those was Hobby Lobby, the case that ultimately went to the Supreme Court, in which they decided that the government couldn't force companies to buy contraceptives or have insurance that buys contraceptives. And Gorsuch, he authored that case in the 10th Circuit level, and so you can expect him to kind of take a similar approach here. So when you're looking at the court and trying to figure out which way it's going to go, Gorsuch is likely not going to be one of the ones to watch. What you're going to see here is you're going to see the 4 conservatives and the 4 liberals are likely going to go to their respective corners. And a lot of the attention is going to be on Justice Anthony Kennedy. He was the one in 2015 who cast the deciding vote in the 5-4 case that legalized gay marriage. And keep an eye on him is what's going to be important. And what you can see in the briefs that have been filed to the Supreme Court, and it really has been remarkable, you are seeing dozens of briefs from all across the country. ACLU, the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce was involved, bakers, religious groups. It's amazing. I mean, there are thousands of pages here to go through, and the justice had to go through. And so, what all of these different briefs what they're focused on is to try to convince Kennedy to come to their cause, because he's key here.
Let's talk about the timing of this case, because in the past the court has said no. There have been, I think, perhaps at least 10 different attempts to have the high court hear this case. So why now? Why at this moment?
Yeah, no, it's interesting where we got to where we were, and I think it's helpful to look at another case from 2014. This came from New Mexico and dealt with some photographers there, and these photographers said that they did not want to take pictures, of a gay couple's wedding because it conflicted with their religious ideas. Very similar to what you're seeing here with Jack Phillips and Masterpiece Cake Shop. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court. On a couple of occasions, the court considered it in conference, and that's when the justices get together and they decide which courses to take, which cases to take, which ones not to take. There were a couple of different meetings to bring it up, and ultimately that case, that New Mexico case, did not get the 4 votes needed to grant cert, so the Supreme Court did not decide to hear it. This time around, the only variable that's changed is that Justice Gorsuch is now in the Supreme Court, which again is not a huge deal because he basically takes the same place and philosophy of Justice Scalia. So what happened, though, this time around, the court considered it 15 times in conference. It kept getting bumped and bumped and bumped, and finally, I don't know if it was a case of the squeaky wheel here, But what it ended up happening is that the court ultimately did end up granting cert.
Right. Mark, before we have to go, real quickly, I'm in Colorado, you're in Washington, D.C. Is it this case seen as big of a deal there as it is perhaps viewed here in the backyard of this debate?
Oh, absolutely. This is probably the premier case for the session of the court this time around.
Mark Matthews of the Denver Post, good to have you on, and we will stay in touch with you as this case moves forward.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. When we come back, Denver Mayor Michael Hancock is here to talk about the changing landscape of the Mile High City.